Number 10. The Hammer Slaying. Marissa DeVault lived in Maricopa County, Arizona, with her husband Dale Harrell, but the marriage came to an end on January 14, 2009, when Marissa clobbered him in the head with a hammer and killed him. Marissa walked into their bedroom and struck Dale multiple times on his skull while he was asleep. He never even knew what happened to him. He was taken to the hospital with multiple skull fractures, but unfortunately didn't make it. And when the cops asked Marissa what happened, she claimed a random man had broken into their home and assaulted her husband. It wasn't until later that Marissa admitted she had beaten him as an act of self-defense because he was abusive. However, the police investigated the claims of abuse and couldn't find much evidence to corroborate what Marissa was telling them. In fact, most of what Marissa told the police was a lie. She lied to them about receiving an inheritance from her dead father, who wasn't even dead. She lied about having an older lover who she was seeing on the side. At her trial, prosecutors tried to get her the death penalty. Marissa's lawyers argued that she suffered from PTSD, which is why she murdered her husband. And so, in 2014, she was found guilty of premeditated murder with excessive cruelty and given life in prison. One of the things that made Marissa's case so bizarre was its similarity to a case that came the year before, that of Jodi Arias. Just 12 months prior in the same courtroom, Jodi was sentenced to life in prison. She also killed her husband, although she used a knife and a gun instead of a hammer. Number 9. Voodoo Mom. A mom in Florida accidentally killed her 3-year-old daughter and injured her 8-year-old daughter after forcing them to chug bleach. Her name is Joanne Zephyr, and she blamed a voodoo spell for what happened in mid-2022. According to the authorities, Joanne and her children were discovered outside a church in the town of Poinciana. Joanne was unconscious in the driver's seat of the car. Her toddler was sitting unresponsive in the back, and the 8-year-old was lying sprawled in the middle of the road, leading to the church's entrance. All 3 were taken to the hospital. The youngest was sadly pronounced deceased, and the older was handed over to other family members. Joanne was booked on an outstanding warrant for attempted murder. As it turned out, Joanne had tried to kill somebody in Orange County. Then she went back home, gathered up her kids, and forced them to drink lethal amounts of bleach. When questioned by the police as to why she would do such a crazy thing, she blamed the victim in Orange County. Joanne said that whoever she had tried to kill, they must have cast a voodoo spell on her that made her harm her own children. In reality, Joanne Zephyr was extremely disturbed in the head. She was mentally unstable, evil, and had attempted to kill herself and her children by guzzling bleach. Number 8. Deadly Eye Drops. Lana Sue Clayton of South Carolina only wanted to make her husband sick. At least, that was her excuse before she was sentenced to 25 years in jail for murder. Because in 2018, she gave her husband, Stephen Delval Clayton, a lethal dose of eye drops. After Stephen died on July 21st, an autopsy discovered toxic levels of tetrahydrozoline, a decongestant used every day by millions of people to relieve redness in the eyes. The only difference was that he had been exposed to a lethal amount, so much of the stuff that it actually caused him to die. The truly evil part is that he didn't die right away. According to Judge Paul M. Birch, Lana Clayton let her husband suffer for 3 continuous days. The poisoning happened slowly over 72 hours. And even though Lana claims she only wanted to make her husband sick, those eye drops killed him. In court, Lana was called a monster. She tried to defend herself by saying she had worked at Veterans Affairs as a nurse, and she was a good person. But the reality is that Lana has a history of husband killing. She shot her previous husband in the back of the head with a crossbow in 2016 and told the police it was an accident. She got away with it, then killed her new husband 2 years later. Number 7. The Abandoner. Joe Imbriale, the owner of a New Mexico business, got a call on a Friday morning in January of 2022. The call was to see if his cameras were working out back of his business, as something had happened and the police needed to review any footage showing the area behind his place. At first, Joe thought someone had broken into one of the stores. But when he reviewed the footage, all he found was a random white car pulling up to the dumpster at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, throwing a black bag into the bin, and then driving away. As it turned out, 6 hours after this car was caught on surveillance at the dumpster, a baby was found inside it. According to the Hobbs police chief, August Fons, it was a group of scavengers who had come to the dumpster to look for any valuables who heard the screech of a baby from inside. That woman in the white car had flung her baby into the dumpster and left it there to be squished by the trash compactor or to simply die from starvation. Thankfully, these dumpster scavengers weren't evil like the woman who tossed her baby away. They wrapped the infant in a dirty towel. The child still had his umbilical cord attached and was covered in dried blood, and they called the police. The baby was saved. Using the surveillance footage, the police then tracked down 18-year-old Alexis Avila, who they charged with attempted murder and child abuse. She said that she had given birth in her parents' bathroom, didn't know what to do with it, and so she put her baby in a trash bag and threw it away. Number 6. Zoe Warren. Zoe Warren was the evil temptress who murdered her boyfriend on December 16, 2016. She got together with her friend Kieran Adey to brutally slay Mark Shaw for no other reason than he wouldn't give her $10 for drugs. He was discovered dead in his home in Grand Villa with over 80 injuries. Investigators found that he had been tied to his bed by his ankles, bound tightly with a cloth in his mouth so he couldn't scream, and then beaten with a pull cue and stabbed with a knife until he was no longer breathing. After the news of his death broke publicly, Zoe Warren went on Facebook and typed a sappy tribute, saying things like Mark was her best friend and soul partner. In reality, Zoe, just 20 years old at the time, had killed her partner over a measly $10. She and her pal Kieran stripped the man naked and beat him so brutally that he was left looking like, according to the police, the Elephant Man. Zoe and her friend Kieran were given life in jail. During their sentencing, the judge described the crime they had committed as a cruel, merciless, and sustained episode of brutality. And for that, they'll never be let back in public again. Number 5. 26 years of lies. Jade Benning lived with her boyfriend Christopher in California back in January of 1996. According to what Jade told the police almost 30 years ago, a dark-skinned individual had forced his way into their apartment, stabbed Christopher to death, and then ran away. When police arrived at the apartment at 3 o'clock in the morning, they discovered Christopher with multiple stab wounds, already dead. But something didn't quite sit right with the police. When they interviewed the neighbors said they had heard a lot of loud arguing in the apartment for at least 15 minutes. Additionally, nobody else had seen the alleged perp skulking around or trying to break into any other apartments. It looked like Jade had killed her own boyfriend after they got into an argument, then used a fake burglar as a scapegoat. However, the police didn't have the proof they needed, and the case went cold in 2001. Jade moved to Las Vegas, then to Austin. She lived on the run for 26 years, having gotten away with murder. It wasn't until January of 2020 that the Santa Ana police reopened the case. Detectives used new forensic testing equipment to collect enough evidence that they were able to issue a warrant for her arrest. The U.S. Marshal stormed her house in Austin, took her away to the Travis County Jail. Jade is now looking at the rest of her life in jail for murdering her boyfriend and blaming it on a random burglar. Number 4. The married boyfriend. A woman in Texas was just accused of killing her boyfriend after he confessed his love for a different woman. Her name is Karen Stewart, 51 years old. She was arrested after she shot and killed who police first believed to be her husband, James Hargrove. It wasn't until shortly after her arrest that they realized James was married to a different woman and that Karen was in fact the other woman. James had already been married for 14 years. His wife is Sandra Hargrove. She told the police that James had been in the hospital for several months, afflicted by COVID-19. After he recovered from his sickness, he appears to have reached out to Karen, telling her he wanted to be with someone else. This someone else wasn't even his wife, but appears to have been an unknown third woman, possibly his caregiver. This guy was tangled up with 3 different women, even as he laid in a hospital bed dying from COVID. James's treachery was enough to push Karen over the edge, and she ended all his relationships by shooting him to death. Number 3. Australia's evilest woman. Belinda Van Crevel has been called the most evil woman in Australia. Most recently, she'd been charged with assaulting an old man in his 80s. But before that, she was the mastermind behind the murder of her own father, Jack Van Crevel. Belinda had convinced her boyfriend at the time to enter her house and chop her father up with a hatchet. While her boyfriend, Keith Schreiber, was busy murdering her father, she laid in a room next door and listened to him scream. This was on August 18, 2000. Belinda was only 19 years old, lying in bed with her 2-year-old child. After the murder was finished, she drove to the police station and told them what happened, but denied any involvement. It wouldn't come out for 2 more years that she was the one who plotted the killing. Belinda was given 6 years in jail and released in 2007. Then, in 2014, she was sent back to jail for stabbing her boyfriend, Marshall Gould. Oddly enough, murder actually runs in the family. Belinda's brother, Mark Valera, is a vicious killer as well. He was convicted in 2000 of 2 different murders. As of February 2022, Belinda is now 41 years old. She was just charged with assaulting a man named Ivan Mlachik, 80 years old. We don't know the exact details, but it does seem like her reign of terror is far from over. Number 2. Evil Charlotte Dootson. Charlotte Dootson has been called an evil and abusive woman. She humiliated her boyfriend by sharing a rather disturbing photograph of him bound and gagged with electrical cables to a man she was chatting with online. This was right before she finished the job and strangled her boyfriend to death. Her boyfriend was Mohammed Mukhtar, a man in his 50s. Charlotte was only 25. She went to his home in August of 2021, strangled him to death with an extension cord, and sent the bizarre photos to a guy online. This was following a long campaign of cruelty and violence against Mr. Mukhtar. According to prosecutor Alaric Bassano, Charlotte was reveling in the turmoil that she caused to her much older boyfriend. The violence she committed against him was gratuitous, while her treatment of him while alive was degrading and humiliating. The pair had been dating for the last 4 years, and Charlotte had sent him to the hospital multiple times for stab wounds and beating him with weapons. Following the murder, which had no motive other than Charlotte appeared to have gotten bored, she was given a minimum of 22.5 years in jail. Only then can she even be considered for parole. Number 1. The AIRTAG stalker. A woman in Indiana has been charged with murder. She became dangerously obsessed with a man that she believed to be her boyfriend. Her obsession grew, she started stalking him, and she used an Apple AirTag to follow him from place to place. Their last encounter was at a bar that she had followed him to after she accused him of cheating on her. Furious, the Indiana woman then ran her victim over with her car. The suspect is 26-year-old Galen Maury. She was arrested in summer of 2022. She used the Apple AirTag to follow Andre Smith, her supposed boyfriend, to Tilly's pub in Indianapolis. She made a huge scene at the bar and threatened to beat the woman Andre was with using an empty wine bottle. But she was eventually forced to leave the establishment. But she was hardly finished. She went outside, got in her car, and waited for Andre to come out. Then she ran him over, backed up, pulled forward, and hit him a total of 3 times. When Andre was dead, she got out of the car and tried to chase the other woman to kill her too. But luckily, the other woman escaped, and the police arrested Galen for murder. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be stuck with an evil sister or trapped in a relationship with an evil woman? Let us know in the comments, and remember to hit subscribe and come back soon for more shocking videos.